The ticking of the clock on the laboratory wall sounded like a hammer hitting a nail. Professor Kazul wasn't moving. He was a skrit, a creature of crystalline nerves and delicate sensory filaments. To him, the world was a symphony of energy. He could see the heat rising from the floor vents. He could hear the hum of the station's fusion core 3 levels down. But his focus was entirely on the boy sitting in the third row. Arthur. To Kazul's specialized eyes, Arthur shouldn't have existed. Every other student in the advanced physics hall was a beacon. The Xylanth girl was a soft, pulsing orange. The avian prince was a jagged streak of electric blue. But Arthur was a whole, a perfect, human-shaped void that absorbed the light of the room and gave nothing back. Kazul's mandibles clicked, a sharp, rhythmic sound of pure nerves. He reached under his desk and pressed a sequence he hadn't touched in 20 years. The massive, multiphasic blast doors slid shut. The magnetic locks engaged with a heavy clack that echoed through the empty lab. The air filtration system hissed and died, leaving the room in a heavy, pressurized silence. Arthur didn't jump. He didn't even look up from his notebook. He was using a pen, actual ink on actual paper. It was a primitive, void-born habit that Kazul had found charming until an hour ago. "Who sent you, Arthur?" Kazul's voice was a jagged rasp. Arthur finally stopped writing. He capped his pen with a slow, deliberate click. "I'm not sure I understand the question, Professor. I'm here on a scholarship from the Outer Rim." "Lies!" Kazul shrieked, his voice cracking. He pulled a Class 7 disruptor pistol from the holster beneath the podium and leveled it at Arthur's chest. His 4 hands were shaking so violently that the red targeting laser danced across Arthur's hoodie like a frantic insect. "I ran the spectral analysis on your seat today. I took a sample of the air you exhaled. Do you know what I found?" Arthur sat still, his face an unreadable mask of Terran symmetry. "I found nothing," Kazul whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "No carbon trace isotopes, no thermal leakage, even your DNA. It's too dense. It's packed together like it was forged in the heart of a gravity well. You're from the Great Rift. You're a void origin entity." Arthur stood up. He did it slowly, but Kazul still flinched. When Arthur moved, the metal stool groaned. It was a small sound, but it betrayed the truth. Arthur was heavy, far heavier than he looked. "The Great Rift isn't a graveyard, Professor," Arthur said. His voice was flat, lacking the musical buzz of the galactic species. To the Skrit, he sounded like a grinding tectonic plate. "It's just space. But back home we call it the supervoid. There are no stars for light years, no cosmic mana, no solar winds to keep the atmosphere warm." Arthur took a step forward. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Kazul felt the heat being sucked out of his own skin, pulled toward the human like water down a drain. "My people spent 1,000,000 years in the dark," Arthur continued, his dark eyes fixed on the gun. "If our bodies leaked energy the way yours do, we would have frozen to death before we ever learned to walk upright. We had to build ourselves into vaults. We don't glow because we can't afford to waste a single joule. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought is recycled. We are the ultimate survivors of the cold." "You're a scout," Kazul stammered, the gun trembling in his grip. "The rift is opening. You're here to see if our sons are worth taking." "I'm an orphan, Kazul," Arthur said, and for a second, the coldness in the room felt like sadness. "I came here because I wanted to see what it felt like to be warm. I wanted to see a sky that wasn't black. But I guess some things don't change. In the dark, people are scared of the shadows. In the light, you're scared of the dark." Before Kazul could respond, the station's secondary power grid let out a dying whine. The blue emergency lights flickered once and then vanished into a suffocating, oily purple gloom. Kazul's filaments went rigid. A sound started, a high-pitched crystalline screech that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly into the brain. It was the sound of glass screaming. "The Vyrn," Kazul breathed, his face turning a sickly gray. They were the galaxy's apex predators, ethereal, ghost-like parasites made of sentient radiation. They didn't eat meat. They drank the lumen, the life force of sentient beings. To a Vyrn, a Skrit professor was a 5-course meal. The blast door, designed to stop nuclear shells, began to warp. A shimmering, iridescent purple mist started seeping through the molecular gaps in the metal. It took form, a translucent, multi-tentacled horror that drifted into the room, its eyes glowing with the hunger of 1,000 years. Kazul fired. The blue disruptor bolt passed right through the Vyrn's chest, leaving a ripple in the mist that healed instantly. The creature hissed, lunging for the professor. Kazul collapsed, feeling the Vyrn's tendrils latch onto his spirit. He felt his memories, his warmth, and his very soul being pulled out of his pores. The world began to fade into a dull, gray fog. Then, the weight in the room shifted. Arthur didn't use a gun. He didn't use magic. He simply stepped into the Vyrn's path and grabbed it. The Vyrn shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated confusion. It was non-corporeal. Nothing was supposed to be able to touch it. But Arthur's body was so dense, his biological gravity so tightly wound that he provided a physical anchor. He wasn't grabbing a ghost, he was grabbing a battery. The Vyrn tried to fight back. It dumped a massive surge of necrotic soul-burning radiation directly into Arthur's hands. Arthur didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. To Arthur, that death energy felt like a cup of hot coffee on a winter morning. His cells, evolved for the starving, lightless hunger of the void, didn't burn. They opened up. They drank. "Is that all you've got?" Arthur growled. He lunged forward, pinning the ethereal predator against the lab table. He reached into the shimmering core of the creature and pulled. The Vyrn's purple light began to flow into Arthur's skin, disappearing into the vault of his cells. The more the Vyrn struggled, the faster it was absorbed. Kazul watched from the floor, gasping for air. He saw Arthur's skin begin to pulse with a faint internal starlight. The human wasn't just killing the monster, he was processing it. The second Vyrn phased through the ceiling, seeing its companion being erased. It tried to flee, but Arthur was faster than any human should be. He leaped, catching the creature midair and slamming it into the floor. He didn't just strike it, he inhaled its essence. Within minutes, the room was silent again. The purple mist was gone. Arthur stood in the center of the lab, his hoodie slightly singed, his eyes swirling with a stolen violet fire. He looked taller. He looked fed. He walked over to the blast door. He didn't look for the keypad. He jammed his fingers into the seam of the 6-inch thick polyalloy and pulled. The metal didn't just bend, it screamed and buckled, the structural integrity of the door failing as if a hydraulic press had hit it. He ripped the door off its tracks and tossed it aside like a piece of cardboard. The hallway was a nightmare of purple light and screams. More Vyrn were descending on the dorms. "Arthur!" Kazul called out, his voice trembling. "If you go out there, if the council sees what you can do, they will never let you be free. They'll cage you. They'll see you as a monster worse than the Vyrn." Arthur paused at the threshold. He looked back at the professor, and for the first time his eyes weren't dark. They were glowing with the power of the things he had just eaten. "Let them try to cage the void, Professor," Arthur said, a grim smile touching his lips. "My people have been huddled in the dark for too long, scared that the galaxy wouldn't have a room for us, but I think I just figured out what we're actually for." He stepped out into the chaos, his footsteps heavy enough to crack the floor tiles. "The galaxy doesn't need more light," Arthur whispered to the shadows. "It needs something that isn't afraid to eat the dark." He didn't run away. He ran toward the screams, a void origin human finally finding out that in a universe of candles, he was the only one who knew how to handle a storm.